Hi. Thank you, everyone, for being. Oh, if we could, we are starting. Thank you so much. So I'm going to speak for a little bit about World Women Foundation. My name is Constance Hunter. I am the head of research at the Economist Group's 3 B2B businesses, the EIU, Economist Impact, and Economist Corporate Network. And I am also the chief economist of the EIU. And we are gathered here tonight at World Women Foundation. And I want to talk for a minute about World Women Foundation's mission to accelerate gender equality by 2050. To achieve this, World Women Foundation launched the Equity Moonshot Initiative, a global effort to envision a future of equality through innovative solutions to advance women's leadership worldwide. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what the Moonshot has accomplished so far. It has reached 500,000 women through storytelling and school programs. It has supported 12,000 women, women-led startups to scale their businesses. It supported over 6,000 emerging female leaders across a variety of industries. It has distributed grants and seed funding to over 3,500 female founders. It's reached 20,000 women via partnerships with GW, and Carnegie is cut off. I'm going to go on a limb and say maybe Carnegie Mellon in the U.S., but maybe it's the Carnegie Foundation. And it's honored 150 women globally for their impact across society. And with us tonight, we have a wonderful panel. So to my left, your right, is FIONA Bassett, CEO of FTSE Russel, part of the London Stock Exchange Group. FTSE Russel is a global index leader that provides innovative benchmarking, analytics, and data solutions for investors worldwide. With strategic and operational expertise spanning multiple geographies, asset classes, and functions, FIONA is known for her energetic and values-driven leadership style, constantly driving innovation and excellence. Throughout her career, FIONA has demonstrated a passion for cultivating talent and building diverse, high-performing teams that deliver exceptional results. Her leadership impact has been acknowledged with prestigious industry awards and accolades, including from American Banker, mutual fund industry, and the Institute for International Finance. A long-standing Deutsche Bank veteran, FIONA was previously the global head of systematic investment solutions and implementation at DWS, where she was also CEO of DWS UK. Okay, to my right, your left, is Magda WIERZYCKA. Close enough? I'm so sorry. I've been practicing that. She is the CEO of Sygnia. Sygnia is a specialist financial services group which is headquartered in South Africa that focuses on the provision of investment and management administration solutions. She started her career as a product development and investments actuary at Southern Life in 1993, and then worked as an investment consultant for 2 years at Alexander Forbes. In 1997, she joined Coronation Fund Managers as a director and head of its institutional business. She then left Coronation in 2003 to start IQVest, a fund hedge funds management company, and later that year, after selling IQVest to the African Harvest Group, she was appointed to the position of CEO of African Harvest. After negotiating the sale of African Harvest to Cadiz Financial Services in 2006, she led the management buyout of the remainder of African Harvest Group, which resulted in the formation of Sygnia. Sorry, I don't know why I can't say that word. I do have a long CV. Yeah, well, you're very accomplished. We have to list all the things. All right. Well, with that, I will start with my sort of intro and first question. So I'm thinking about sort of World Women's Foundation and their mission and their focus on helping women start businesses. It really resonates with me because as a graduate student, I was working at the UN, and I thought I might pursue a career in economic development. But I quickly learned that what the data showed was that in countries with higher market capitalization to GDP, you had greater female education levels, greater female labor force participation, lower infant mortality rates, and a whole host of metrics that really improved the whole society. So through economic empowerment, you not just empower women, but you uplift an entire society. And so that's sort of what led to my career in finance. I spent the first half of my career using macroeconomics and asset management. I then spent about a decade at KPMG as their chief economist. And I joined EIU from AIG, where I was the executive vice president, global head of strategy. So right now in the world, the OECD is actually representative of most developing economies as well. The female labor force participation rate is 68% versus men, which is 81%. So if we're going to achieve parity, we not only need to have as many women participating as men, but the women who are participating are going to have to achieve more, right? And that's a pretty tall order, but I think that we're up for the task. So Magda, let me start with you. How have your previous experience as a woman in business informed the culture that you've formed at your firm?
So, just a very potted bit of it is that, I worked in asset management industry, and as you know, it's just men, and a whole lot of aggression on the table. And then, led companies, and in 2006, I walked out of a company, and I said, you know what, I will never work for another man again. And that's when I founded my own company, Sygnia, and we listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange in 2015, and then I started a venture capital firm in the UK in 2019. Again, basically with a very strong theme of, I will hire men of a particular ilk, and that is, the moment I perceive this kind of, male tendency to, I know this is terrible. Sounds very sexist, but this tendency to build empires, to disempower others, to take credit for other people's work. That's the end of their career at Sygnia. So in terms of, the company, we employ around 500 people, 70% of our company, and it's a financial services group. 70% of the company are women. Most of our executive positions are women. And what I found, in terms of, and again, my career in finance, is that, women make for incredible employees. And the only thing you have to provide to get the best out of women and out of collaboration is flexibility. So provided you do not mind and you give women the space to take their children to the doctor, to attend that school party scheduled for 10 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday, you get, ultimate loyalty, incredibly hard work, and very little of this kind of dog-eat-dog environment that financial services industry creates around the male-oriented culture. Deutsche Bank being a very good example. I know a lot of investment bankers. I happen to know a lot of people who have worked in senior positions at Deutsche Bank in the UK.
So how does this culture that you've cultivated impact your results, do you think? And how does it impact your generating clients and interest from your counterparties?
100%. So Sygnia has grown literally. There were like 6 of us in the room, and we had no funding whatsoever. So this isn't a company where we had shareholders. I still am the majority shareholder of Sygnia, despite the fact that it's listed. So we really started from nothing and managed to grow the company into, we are mid-sized financial services firm in South Africa. We are the second largest index tracking company in South Africa. So through sheer dedication of people who work with me, we've managed to create something very special. Now, I have, based on my experiences, I did during COVID write a book about, never mind my experience. I've been involved in a lot of corruption fighting, so there was a lot of that kind of stuff I put in it. But also about women and how women are different to men in terms of working. You know, women are a lot more emotional. Women cry. And I've always said, that's perfectly fine. Cry. There is no issue. Just recognize the fact that you emotionally react differently. And that's okay. But the two provisos, what you need to realize about this crying, because, you know, I've cried in my career. God, have I cried? It's the easiest. Our emotions are the easiest thing that men can manipulate not to pay us. So, you know, at the beginning of my career, financial services, asset management, I would walk end of the year bonus negotiation. And all that the CEO of that company had to say to me is, Magda, amazing, you've done an amazing job. But people don't like you. Tears. You're immediately grateful for what the guy gives you as a bonus. So instead of, you know, if you say the same thing to a man, you say, John, brilliant work. But, you know, people don't like you. A man will go, stuff that was my money. A woman goes, thank you for whatever it is that you give me. But, you know, the other, so that's one thing that you've got to recognize. And then once you've recognized it and once you know how to manage your financial remuneration and how not to be manipulated through the manipulation of your emotions. So that's one. And two is, you know, and then there are like a lot of lessons that I have out of my career. But the other thing is, and again, financial services, I've never thought of myself as a woman in a man's world. I just see myself as, you know, be it an employee. So I'm very gender neutral in terms of how I regard myself in the workplace. And that also has been super helpful. So rather than thinking women are, you know, we are somehow disadvantaged. I've just never seen it that way. You know, I've just would walk into the boardroom and see myself as a very neutral person, as opposed to kind of going, okay, I'm a woman in a man's world. Well, you know, one of the things, and I'm stop.
Well, yeah, I was going to say maybe we'll have a little bit more of a back and forth.
Stop.
So. Fiona, turning to you, you know, the index space is a place where we're seeing a lot of meaningful progress. Women now lead 2 of the 3 largest index providers. And from your perspective, what do you think has enabled this shift? What does it suggest about how leadership pipelines and governance are evolving across that whole ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think it's super interesting because if you look at, and first off, I'd say it's great to be here and spend some time with all of you today. I think it's super interesting, right? You look at the financial services sector and, you know, women comprise around 46% on average, and yet the representation at an executive level is under 15%, which tells you that there is work to do across the broad industry spectrum. And I think if I look at the kind of evolution of the indexing space, which I have been kind of around for some, but not all of my career, I spent about half my career on the investment banking side and then asset management, and most recently in the last 2 and a bit years, having moved over to the index provider space. I think one observation I would have is that that part of the industry was really kind of like an emerging growth area if you go back the last sort of 20 years. And I think that in many instances, those areas were at the time seen to be peripheral, and perhaps women were encouraged to take some of these roles. They weren't the mainstream P&L roles at the time. Yeah. They were much smaller. And
now they're where it's all happening.
And now they're where it's happening. So I guess that tells all of you to take a risk. Mm-hmm. But I do think that that's been a big part of it. I also think that there has been a really kind of like harnessing of the power of the community, and particularly through an organisation, Women in ETS, which actually I've sat on the board of that organisation. It started 10 years ago It now has just under 13,000 members globally, of which 20%, I'm thrilled to say, are men, should be higher, but 20% are men, which also shows you that there's a underlying demand for kind of allyship. And I think that was incredibly powerful, because if you look across the spectrum, there are firms at very different stages of, I don't want to even say progressiveness, because I kind of think it's a license to operate. But there are certain firms who, perhaps have been more challenged at trying to create gender equality and equity. And the power of that network for people to be able to share experiences, get advice, but candidly also introductions that then facilitated future career moves, I think was super powerful. And then I think on top of that, you've had the index firms are kind of sit in the middle, because our role is really to develop data and indices that allow investors to be able to benchmark and therefore make better investment decisions. And actually, as part of our role, we create a whole range of sustainable indices and indices that are incorporating various corporate governance metrics. So perhaps we sit as that kind of trust broker in the middle, that is not only more neutral, but actually has that embedded in the way in which we utilize data, measure data, and then incorporate that data and findings into our own industry. So yeah, a lot of progress. As you rightly pointed out, 2 out of the 3 of the top 3 providers are helmed by females. That wouldn't have been the case if you wound back 2 years ago, so it's recent progress. But half of the top 6 are also female, and actually the CEO of the Index Industry Association is also female. So when I look at kind of the foundations here, I think there's a huge opportunity and candidly a responsibility for us to drive infrastructure changes that help facilitate equality more broadly. And I say that because if I look at the evolution of the industry and gender representation, I think it really speaks to the power of the community, but it's infrastructure that's ultimately going to scale it.
Yeah. So it's funny, when I joined KPMG from finance, we had a goal. We had 19% of our partners were women, and we had a goal of reaching 25, which in 5 years, and it's since been achieved. I'm happy to report at KPMG. But even just entering a firm where it wasn't guaranteed that I was going to be the only woman in the room, and it was really refreshing. Even though when I was younger in my career, I didn't particularly notice a big difference. But as you get more senior, I think that's when it really starts to matter. So I guess I'll ask both of you, and Fiona, maybe I'll stick with you for a minute. What do you think the most important KPIs are for measuring gender equality in the workplace, and how does that impact different factors of the bottom line?
Yeah, so the reality is I think it's multifaceted. Clearly there needs to be an evaluation of the representation of gender, and I would say diversity more broadly at every level of the organisation. You need to understand what's the promotion velocity and how that differs across the different communities.
It's not just promotion, but it's that velocity of promotion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about pay equity. It's also about retention differentials. What happens at certain stages of the life cycle where people periodically leave the workforce, and do they come in? And I think we've all seen industries that start at equality at the start, but then rapidly diverge, and that middle level particularly, either people go out completely, or if they've been in P&L focus roles, they get moved suddenly to non-P&L and much more kind of support function roles. But I think there's also a very powerful one, which is what's the allocation of opportunity. And when you look at how capital is deployed in the companies, how does that skew? When you look at the risk metrics, how is that kind of informing decisions? But I think ultimately, KPIs are really helpful, but unless they drive action, they're ultimately just statistics. And so I think it's really important to embed those KPIs, not just at a company level, but at board level, and ultimately tie executive compensation to it, because ultimately it's really important that those KPIs drive behavior.
Yeah, that's a great point. So you mentioned having a workplace that has some flexibility. And there's a very famous economist named Claudia Goldwyn who won the Nobel Economics Prize several years ago. And she did work on gender pay gaps. And what she studied was the difference in pay between lawyers and pharmacists. And so those are two jobs where you have hourly compensation. Lawyers bill by the hour, pharmacists are paid by the hour. And the pharmacist who works 40 hours versus the pharmacist who works 60 hours, this pharmacist who works regularly 60 hours does not earn more per hour than the pharmacist working 40 hours. But that's not true for the legal profession, right? In the legal profession, if you're working 60 hours a week, you're getting more knowledge. That knowledge is compounding. You're building relationships. Those relationships are compounding. And so you actually get paid more per hour as you start to compound that knowledge, that experience, those connections. And so what she found was that actually what you needed parity in terms of things like family leave, parental leave, and you needed to encourage men to take that in order for there to be that same sort of what economists term that sort of family deficit that women have to overcome. So I just was wondering, at your firm, do you encourage that same flexibility for the men in your organization, and might that make it a really attractive place for both genders to work?
100%. So, what you want to do is, and, I always listen to things that happen in a corporate environment with fascination, because I stepped out of the corporate environment. And I did that because, I kind of recognized the glass ceiling and decided, I'll never break through the glass ceiling, so I might as well build my own house. So what I've tried to do is encourage collaboration. Now, you're not going to encourage collaboration if you don't, again, remove the gender from the lexicon of the company and make it completely gender neutral. Mm-hmm. So everyone at Sygnia gets exactly the same flexibility. Having said that, what I always recognize is that men have a much easier life than we do, because men have a very singular purpose. They typically have a home and they have a wife, and the wife takes care of everything. Plus, she goes to work. A man expects his shirt to be ironed and he goes to work. That's his sole responsibility. So you have to recognize the fact that women are multitaskers and jugglers of responsibility, and hence, despite the fact that, it is collaborative, I do kind of look at women and, as someone who effectively determines bonuses, determines KPIs, so at least guides the thinking of the managers in the company, I do kind of balance the flexibility in favor of women. And, I kind of look a little bit more dimly at men abusing the flexibility.
Well, that's interesting, because, I think we do want men to participate and be encouraged to participate at home. And I think what I certainly see, I manage teams over 100 people all over the world. And what I see in the young men on my teams is them taking advantage of parental leave, taking advantage of going to pick up their kids, being there at the 10 o'clock meeting with an equal, if not even slightly higher measure than the women. And of course, what the economic research shows, if that's the way of the future, then you're going to naturally see an equalization in the gender pay gap, and I would imagine ultimately in the velocity of promotion. Fiona, let me just wrap up with, you had mentioned this community that you're involved in, and women lifting other women up. And how do we foster that same sort of supportive community within organizations?
Yeah, so maybe I think the first thing is we need to bridge the onlyness problem, because there's a whole bunch of statistics that when you have a female cohort, or in fact any other diverse cohort, that is less than 30%, it actually results in disengagement. And so it's incredibly important that we foster clusters, and those clusters are ultimately scale. I think we have to make sure that the infrastructure is in place. You mentioned parental leave. We actually have an equal parental leave policy. I'm thrilled to say in our company it's widely taken up. And we need to make sure also that it's not just a tone from the top, it's not just signalling, but it's really instituted, and that actions match the words on this, because I think that women are looking to be part of organizations where they can help shape the outlook and output from those organizations, and have real material influence. But I would say, and I want to say a shout out to the guys in the room, I think it is incredibly important that we involve men in this, and the importance of allyship is huge. If I look at my own career development, I've been very helpful to have a number of male sponsors. And the reality is, certainly in the financial sector, while the representation is at executive level of only 15%, it is really, really important to engage the 85%.
Yes.
So I applaud everyone, the guys who are here, and I think that we have to work together to collectively solve that. And I think if we look at this about how do we maximize talent output and talent reach, rather than frame this in the context of minorities, because of course women are not a minority, just to be clear, then I think we will see more seismic change.
I love that, and that is a perfect note to end on. Thank you both for being here. Davos is really busy. We're running from meeting to meeting, and our time is our most precious resource, so really grateful to have you join me on stage tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.